It's good to be back on the water, but the Straw Hats aren't there just yet. Though the fighting is finished, there's still a lot of stuff to cover. We're going through the last several chapters, then after that I'll wrap up this series by going through some of the important world building and themes that have been introduced and expanded upon this saga. So, immediately after the end of the Civil War, we see what the Marines have been up to, starting off with Smoker. It ends up that the thing he was disappearing off to do was to track down Crocodile's rain-making ship. He confirms that he didn't use any dance powder, so that rain that ended the war was completely natural. He does have a guest though, the woman that we saw during Django's cover story, Hina. We get a sense of the two's relationship before seeing Tashigi, who has forbidden the Marines under her command to arrest the Straw Hat crew. When we see the Marines the next day, we get an explanation. As Tashigi apologizes to Smoker for aiding Luffy and the crew, he responds by asking if she was following her own sense of justice. But she wasn't. Rather, she couldn't. Her lack of strength meant that she was unable to enforce her sense of justice. She had to assist Luffy because justice demanded it, though not her justice. Tashigi starts to cry and declares that she will become stronger, and it all seems like things will wrap up nicely, until headquarters call. Top-ranking ministers of the government are rewarding Tashigi and Smoker with the capture of Crocodile. They will give them medals at an awards ceremony. Smoker can't believe this. It wasn't them who defeated Crocodile, it was Luffy. His dear subordinate that he cares about is in tears because she was unable to enforce her justice on Crocodile. So in true Smoker fashion, he tells them to shove off. Smoker doesn't care about accolades, about the higher-ups, he cares about protecting the innocent. Normally that means he needs to defeat pirates, but this time it was an exception. That is his sense of justice. But what Oda is showing us is that this is not the world government's sense of justice. As Hina puts it, the government doesn't want the truth to get out. I'll talk more about justice when we finish the chapter content, so let's continue on for now. We see a continuation of Alabasta celebrating the rainfall, and I love the panel of Toto smiling up to the sky, completely vindicated. Just 3 years, that's all it took. His hope and trust paid off in the end. I've also got to point out this absolute mad lad just filling his mouth with the rainwater, and then the panel where we get to see the Mary protected by Luffy's dugong disciples. Then we see the Straw Hats all sound asleep, and I've got to rank their different snores. Nami is last, her zzz is far too elegant. Zoro's snore is next for being basic. There's a big gap, then Chopper's grah, which is barely a snore at all. Sanji's hrork is pretty good, then Luffy's hronk. But my favorite is Usopp's snurf, because try and say snurf with Usopp's mouth shape. It just doesn't make any sense. The next chapter is just simple happiness. We're just seeing the crew and how they're recovering after a tough battle, what they're doing in their downtime, and most importantly seeing Vivi relaxing. Her land is free. She no longer has to fight to save it. She's assisting Chopper in helping Luffy recover, but she's just smiling. Some nice moments include scaling Chopper as a doctor. Kureha is one of the best doctors, full stop, no questions asked. Maybe Crocus could compare, but our introduction to him wasn't focused on his abilities as a doctor. So, due to his proximity to his teacher, it was hard to say how skilled of a Dr. Chopper actually is. Now, when being visited by a Doctor of Alabasta, we get to see that, actually, yeah, Chopper is actually quite a skilled doctor. He's advanced in his creation of medicine, using a technique that this doctor, likely one of the most skilled in the land if he's serving in the palace, never knew existed. Unfortunately for Chopper, Zoro, in the meanwhile, is trying to recall how he managed to cut steel. If he isn't able to draw upon that power whenever he wants, then he hasn't really gotten any stronger. Though in pursuit of this training, he is completely ignoring Chopper's orders as the crew's doctor. Luffy finally wakes up, and the first thing he asks for is his hat, and that made me realize I completely missed the detail when he throws it on the ground during the fight with Crocodile. Once more proving that no matter how many times I read One Piece, there's always something new to discover. It's such a small detail, but it really drives home that defeating Crocodile for Vivi's sake was his #1 priority at the time, so much so that he threw his personal treasure on the floor so it wouldn't get in his way during the fight. Thankfully, his hat wasn't destroyed and is safely returned to him, and in short order, Vivi fulfills her promise to him. It's time to eat until he explodes. And it's just more good times. Luffy and the crew's attitude cuts through all ranks, all formalities, and it just brings joy. Vivi is laughing freely, so are Igaram, Chaka, and King Cobra, all laughing, and even the soldiers who are looking down on the vulgarity of it are soon all laughing and dancing along as well. Crocodile has truly been defeated. The country which he had stolen has been returned, and we can tell because the people are laughing a lot more. Which means, with this feast, we've completed yet another Luffy Liberation Loop. They've been more sparse than they were in the east. Luffy has only liberated Laboon and the former Drum Kingdom this saga, but the liberation of Alabasta has been the big juicy liberation we've been looking forward to. It's been both the physical liberation of the land from the threat of Crocodile, but also Vivi's mental liberation from the mindset that she must do everything alone, showing her that she has people she can rely on. But of the 3 base steps of a Luffy liberation loop, the 4th optional one being the big feast afterwards, there's one that's still hanging in the air. The 3rd step that happens after Luffy liberates someone, which I defined way back in the point of East Blue as the liberated person is then free to pursue their dreams and/or goals. Alabasta has been liberated, and we see the people rebuilding at a remarkable pace, and we see Koza heading to Yuba to help there. The goal of building up and making the kingdom better is front of mind. But what about Vivi? As we see in the following bath scene, Vivi is thinking about all the wonders waiting to be discovered in the world. We saw it before in Little Garden. Vivi has an adventurous streak in her, and Nami can see that as she gives her a knowing smile. Oh, and while we're at the baths, I love the fact that Zoro is the one helping Chopper bathe, the start of their big brother, little brother style relationship. The simple happiness can't last, unfortunately, as Igaram and Chaka see some updated bounty posters that shows the Straw Hat's increased notoriety. Luffy is now at 100 million berries, and Zoro now has a bounty of 60 million. Igaram rushes to warn them, but all he finds is Vivi. The crew have already left. They've gone to the sea, because that's where pirates belong. Elsewhere in Alabasta, much like their cover story implied, we see Django in full body in service to Hina. Django has gone full marine, no remorse in his heart for pirates, rather the hypnotist has been hypnotized by his beautiful superior. Thankfully, we learn that the Going Merry is no longer at Erumalu where they left it, though Hina and her navy subordinates are in hot pursuit. Meanwhile, the Straw Hats are crossing the desert with the assistance of the Supersonic Duck Squadron, though Nami looks a bit down. And very graciously lets go of the billion berries that Igaram, well, she says he promised, but did he actually? Either way, we all know that Nami loves to mask her desire to help others with greed. Vivi, back at the palace, struggles to fall asleep. It's too quiet. She's used to more people being around her, and she looks wistfully away as she thinks about what happened earlier in the day, when best boy Bon Clay called up the Straw Hats to let them know he's taken their ship because, well, they're friends, aren't they? Now that Baroque Works is gone, he's got no reason to fight them, and he can be true to himself. With the Going Merry's updated location, we see Vivi in turmoil. Does she stay in Alabasta as its princess, or does she go to the sea with the Straw Hats and become a pirate? Nami gives her 12 hours to decide, and where they'll meet at Alabasta's East Port to pick her up. As Vivi lays in bed, she considers it, thinks about how she'll get there in time, her life as a princess, and of course the fact that she and Karoo are a package deal. He'll be coming along too, surely. While Vivi has been contemplating, the Straw Hats have made it to the Merry, and they say farewell to the squadron. Bon Clay is a little grumpy though, his dear friends are giving him the cold shoulder. Luffy responds in kind. Didn't Bon Clay trick them? Well, no, Crocodile never shared who they were to Bon Clay before he ran into them, so their initial interaction was completely genuine. Luffy still isn't convinced, and Bon Clay updates him on the current situation. The island is surrounded by Navy ships, and without him, the Going Merry would have surely been captured. And why did he save their ship? Because they are his friends. And because he needed help to get off the island and through the blockade, but mainly because they're friends. Unfortunately, as they're celebrating friendship, we see that Hina has discovered their location. The next morning, we see that both Igaram and the king have been worried that Vivi is going to run off and become a pirate, bursting in as she's getting ready for her big day, her coming-of-age ceremony that has been delayed for 2 years, a ceremony to celebrate her passage from child to adult. Chaka also reports to Igaram the fighting at the port, though the Navy's jurisdiction clearly supersedes their own, so they cannot get involved. When we cut to the port, we see that the Straw Hats are struggling, and the poor Mary is skewered by multiple iron spears. This is the specialty of Hina's squadron, encircling ships and taking them down from a distance, and these spears are much harder to deflect than cannonballs. And part of me wonders whether it's just a coincidence that Full Body is part of the crew attacking them, someone who witnessed Luffy being able to deflect cannonballs firsthand. Thankfully, Usopp still has his skills with a cannon and manages to take out both Full Body and Django's ships, making a gap in the formation. But Luffy and the crew refuse to take it because they need to pick up a friend. Bon Clay, someone who understands the importance of friendship, takes notice, and he rallies his crew, who, to their credit, are also moved by the fact that the Straw Hats are putting their lives on the line for a friend. As Bon Clay's swan ship starts pulling away from the Going Merry, Hina thinks it's a diversion until they spot Luffy on board, so they quickly race after them. But it's not Luffy they find. Bon Clay and his crew have all dressed up as the Straw Hats, Bon Clay using his powers for good instead of ill, declaring that he is a friend of the Straw Hat gang. And you know what? Bon Clay has done some heinous things this arc, framing the king, kicking a child, trying to kill Vivi, but damn it, when he strikes that pose, looks straight at Hina and says, "Shall we dance?" All his past sins are wiped clean in my book. He was just living his "oh come my way." He is more than words and readily puts his life on the line for his friends, just as Luffy did for Vivi, and just like Luffy, Usopp, Chopper, and even a very emotional Sanji say, "We'll never ever forget you guys." Alright, okay. I'm fine, let's move on. The next chapter is really a bookend to Vivi's journey this saga, starting off with a brief flashback to before she infiltrated Baroque Works, the moment when Igaram first shares with Vivi that an underground organization has infiltrated the kingdom, and Vivi's immediate desire to counter-infiltrate and do what she can to reveal the heinous plot. And yeah, alright, I can't in good conscience not mention this iconic panel. No, this isn't edited. Vivi's genius idea has truly caused her forehead to grow twice its usual size. As we cut back to the present, we see someone who appears to be Vivi taking the stage in front of her people. Meanwhile, the Straw Hats are desperately fighting to meet at the designated place. Then Vivi addresses the crowd as the entirety of Alabasta listens. She tells them of her journey and, most importantly, the little ship and its crew that pushed her towards the light. When the crew hear her voice, most of them think she isn't coming, but as it's revealed that Igaram has dressed up as Vivi, the princess calls out to the crew and the Merry, but she is there to say goodbye. She loves adventure, she's loved her time with the crew, but there is something that she loves even more. The reason why she set out to sea in the first place, the reason she struggled and fought against insurmountable odds, the reason she infiltrated Baroque Works, was willing to cut off her legs to push through all manner of obstacles and dangers, the reason she was willing to face a warlord of the sea. Her kingdom. And Luffy accepts her decision with a smile. Luffy wants Vivi to come with them, but he understands and is happy when people pursue their own desires, especially if it's the people he cares about, as long as they're being true to themselves. Although, even though she has decided to stay, she calls out and asks them, "If we ever see each other again, will you call me your shipmate?" As Luffy is ready to shout out his response, Nami stops him. If Luffy does talk while the Marines watch, she'll be branded a criminal, an associate of pirates. So as they turn away, they lift up their arms, bearing the hidden symbol, the one that proves that they are who they say they are, the sign of their unbreakable fellowship, high into the air. Vivi will always be their friend, their shipmate, the person who joined them on their journey since they first entered the Grand Line. And she, along with Karoo, raise their sign of fellowship in response. Vivi knows what she wants to do, knows that she has friends that she can rely on, so we can say that the Luffy liberation loop has been completed. With their farewells in order, Oda takes us on a quick tour of the entirety of Alabasta to really wrap things up. We see Hina's devil fruit as she playfully chastises Smoker. We see all the different creatures of Alabasta, with Eyelashes getting the VIP treatment. We see all the different people coming together keenly with Yuba in mind, and Toto looking brightly towards the future. I like the detail that with real hope and the combined will of the people to make Alabasta better, they've lost interest in the false hope that was being sold at Crocodile's casino. Then we see our main players. Igaram and the King are addressing the crowd. Chaka is looking at Pell's grave. At Vivi and Karoo watch the Straw Hats fade into the distance, and a certain someone thanks a doctor, though he leaves his headwear behind. Alright. So it's obvious that Pell is alive, and here's my take on it. This series, I've realized that I'm really more interested in the why of something happening, the themes and the reasoning, what Oda is trying to tell us, so I'll make my take with that perspective. On one hand, Pell being alive cheapens his sacrifice. Crocodile didn't count on people genuinely sacrificing themselves, Luffy and the Straw Hats and Pell, in order to stop him. So the genuine sacrifice for the sake of his kingdom and to protect Vivi on the part of Pell really rubs Crocodile's nose in the fact that selfishly living for yourself, not trusting others, etc., gets defeated by a willingness to trust in others and put your life on the line and even give it for another's sake. On the other hand, Pell being alive is a sign of hope for both Alabasta and Vivi. We don't end up seeing a casualty count for the civil war in Alabasta, but Vivi has been so focused, fighting so hard that none of her people die. Sure, her naivety is called out by both Luffy and Crocodile, but her genuine desire is there. If, in the end, she succeeds by stopping the war thanks to the death of not just one of her citizenry, but one who she cares about, it proves Crocodile right. To solve problems require the death of her people, her beautiful naive dream be damned. For Pell to live means that her dream may be possible after all. Her desire as future Queen of Alabasta to not have to sacrifice her people can potentially be achieved. I think, in the context of the chapter, seeing Alabasta full of joy, hope, pushing towards the future, I understand why Oda had Pell survive. It's supposed to be an uplifting moment, the country coming together, and most importantly is the next page where the narrator states, "The kingdom of Alabasta recovered with astounding speed." So Pell too, when we think he should have been obliterated beyond repair, just as the countries around Alabasta expected the civil war to leave them beyond recovery, both can recover beyond all expectations. In an arc all about hope triumphing, I see why Oda chose the latter. That sentiment aside, the ramifications of Pell surviving now does lurk within the reader's mind. To pull out a favorite phrase I've used several times, you may not have noticed, but your brain did. With Pell's survival, that seed of skepticism has been planted. If Pell can survive, what even are stakes anymore? Will every noble sacrifice not actually be a sacrifice? I've got more thoughts about this decision, particularly how it reflects on Oda's style of forming a story, but I'll leave those for another day. Let's get back to our farewell to Alabasta. Vivi heads home to Alabana, and we get that panel telling of Alabasta's astounding recovery, and we end off with Smoker and Tashigi musing on Zoro and Luffy's new bounties, ending by saying that they'll settle things with them another day. With that, we finally leave the sands of Alabasta, but we can't finish just yet. We see the crew aboard a sadly quite banged up Mary, and everyone is sad that Vivi isn't there anymore, aside from Zoro, whom they throw insults at. Though they mourn the departure of their friend, it appears as though they have a stowaway, as Nico Robin emerges to everyone's shock, aside from Luffy. As she calmly takes a seat, she tells Luffy that he needs to take responsibility for what he's done to her, and then tells him that she wants to join his crew. As hinted at previously by Cobra, Luffy carried 2 people out from the underground chamber, and that meant that his second passenger was Robin, and we get one last flashback showing what happened immediately following Luffy's fight with Crocodile. First, Robin provides Luffy with an antidote to Crocodile's poison claw, confident that he'll survive the underground collapse due to his devil fruit, and then we get the reveal that Robin lied to Crocodile about the contents of the poneglyph. It indeed contained the information that Crocodile was seeking about the Pluton, but unlike Crocodile, that was not what Robin was looking for. She was instead looking for a specific poneglyph called the Real Poneglyph, the poneglyph that recounts the true history. Although Cobra inquires what that means, Robin doesn't respond. Instead, we get quite a sad scene. Robin wants to know the true history. She's been searching for it for 20 years, and the poneglyph in Alabasta was her last hope. So now, with that last hope quashed, Robin gives up and decides to simply die. She has given up on her dream. Cobra starts talking about scripts spun together to tell of an untold history, and then starts to say a very curious line, "If so, then why are we?" But is cut off as Luffy gets up, hoisting Robin over his shoulder and the king under his arm. Robin protests, saying that she doesn't want to live, but just like Robin couldn't decide the course Luffy would take, Luffy doesn't see any reason to listen to her now. It's an interesting parallel. In this arc, when Vivi gave up hope and was ready to accept her death, Luffy was there to catch her and revive that hope. Now we see Robin also having given up hope and ready to accept death, and this time Luffy carries her out, despite her protestations. Perhaps her hope may also be revived. Luffy, as we saw with Gaimon many chapters ago, isn't above letting someone into his crew out of a sense of responsibility, so he accepts Robin despite his own crew's disagreement. But hey, she didn't actually kill Igaram, she rescued Luffy from the sand and she gave him the antidote to the poison. Luffy knows that even if she can't say she's a good person just yet, she's at least not a bad person. And we finally end this saga getting introduced to Robin, and very fittingly for a saga that had us delving into history, Robin is an archaeologist. She tells Usopp that her specialty is assassination, but putting it bluntly, she hasn't successfully killed anyone this arc, and based off her cute little laugh, I reckon she's probably just messing with Usopp. She does have a bit of an odd sense of humor. She then wins over the crew, playing with Luffy and Chopper, giving gems to Nami, being a beautiful woman in the vicinity of Sanji, and then assisting in making an absolute banger of a joke to finally win over Usopp. Zoro is still skeptical, as he usually is, but then we get another parallel with Vivi. When Robin asks Zoro if it's always like this, I'm reminded of when Nami asked Vivi, "Don't your cares just melt away on a ship like this?" And that sort of peacefulness that Vivi and now Robin are experiencing. We've seen Vivi's journey to finding peace, that little ship that showed her the light, and now we can see Robin beginning that same journey. As Robin asks Nami her log pose course, the course towards the Straw Hat's next adventure, this is where I'll finally end the chapter. Technically, I've gone past where the Alabasta Saga actually ends, but hey, I did the same thing with the East Blue, so at least I'm consistent. With the contents of the chapters complete, it's time to go through the saga as a whole. I'll be summarizing heavily, after all that's what the series is for if you want the details, so let's start off with world building. Compared to the world building of the East Blue, which was focused on setting up the series' main concepts, the Alabasta Saga introduces us to the Grand Line and expands the understanding we established back in the East. The big thing that the saga introduces is the setup of the journey as a whole, how navigation works via the log pose, the importance of the log pose, how islands have their own seasons, wildlife, and even time periods, that only by following the log pose through the Grand Line will you reach the final island, Laugh Tale. Oda showed us a wide variety of islands, a prehistoric jungle, a snowy mountainous region, and a desert kingdom. He's created a set of guidelines that, despite being guidelines, don't actually restrict him in any way. Islands can be anything, and the Straw Hats must follow the log pose. In addition, Oda has introduced the concept of eternal poses as a way for the Straw Hats, and anyone else for that matter, to travel to specific islands if they need to. Beyond just Alabasta, Oda has dropped a few names of note. Blackbeard, Whitebeard, and of course, Ace. He's made sure to let us know that there's far more than just a location that they need to find, but powerful figures beyond the apparent backwater that is Alabasta, and we must remember the piece of paper that Ace provided that will bring Luffy and Ace together again. Next is the expansion on a trend established in the East. Oda introduced us to different races via the fishmen and, potentially, mermaids, but Oda introduced us to another race by way of the Giants, giving us a glimpse at their culture powered by religion and honor, and we know of their homeland, Elbaf, which Luffy and Usopp are very excited to visit. It's not just seafaring races that Oda is introducing, there are plenty more and by extension surely more to come. The other important expansion that Oda performed is that of devil fruits. He's introduced us to the classes of devil fruits, first with the introduction of Zoan devil fruits. Via Chopper we learned that devil fruits work on non-humanoids and that Zoan animal transformations include humans in that category. And then with the introduction of Lasso, the gun who ate a devil fruit, all bets are off. Inanimate objects can consume devil fruits, and there is a looming question about whether devil fruits, or at least Zoan devil fruits, may have a mind of their own. We've seen in the Grand Line that there appears to be a much higher concentration of devil fruit eaters, and we've seen a much wider variety of abilities as a result. A large part of the world building for Alabasta is the introduction of royalty. We've seen two kingdoms, the Drum Kingdom in Alabasta, and by extension, good and bad royalty. We know that, while these kingdoms have some level of autonomy, they are still under the world government in some form, with Marines seemingly having jurisdiction in these nations and the world government being able to create laws that affect these nations, as shown by the dance powder banning. Though they do have a meeting of leaders facilitated by the world government, so they do have some involvement. But by far, one of the most important parts of the world building are the mysteries that Oda introduced this saga. There is the mystery surrounding the Will of D, the D initial that Luffy and Roger both have, the existence of an ancient weapon, the Pluton, and then the poneglyphs, these records of history written in a language that is apparently rare for someone to be able to read, and one called the Real Poneglyph, which contains the true history. And this is where world building starts to turn into theming. Indeed, a big theme of Alabasta has been history, the knowledge and power of those who are older, Crocus and his knowledge of the Grand Line, giants and their ancient strength, and Dr. Kureha and her knowledge of Roger's real name and the Will of D, and the fact that we end the saga with the recruitment of an archaeologist into the crew. This theme of history makes the series not just a story that takes place in the present, but one that expands into the past, where that which came before echoes into the events of the present day. Dr. Hiraluk's line of someone only dying when they are forgotten, carrying more weight as the theme of history is married with an equally important theme of inherited will. However, just as history has become front of mind this saga, there is something equally pressing. If there is a true history, then by necessity that means there is a false one. Oda has been dropping hints that there is something desiring to suppress historical fact. The Alabasta poneglyph being kept secret, Gold D. Roger's real name not being well known, and most overtly, the truth of Crocodile's downfall being covered up. The world government, who should be an ally of Alabasta and thusly have a part to play in protecting such an important artifact, who are responsible for the distribution of bounty posters bearing the names of their targets, and whose higher-ups have made the decision to hide the truth about Crocodile, to hide a record of history from them and their aversion to the truth, hints at something behind the scenes. Which leads to the late theme into the saga, justice. When we were first introduced to the concept of justice, and I mean explicitly, it was when we saw Navy headquarters for the first time. The Navy uses their might to crush the evil forces sailing the seas, i.e. pirates, in the name of absolute justice. But Smoker and Tashigi show that justice is anything but absolute. The pair's definition of justice clearly differs from those of their superiors in the world government. All we know for sure is that justice requires power to be enforced, and unfortunately for Smoker, the top-ranking ministers of the government with the entirety of the Marines under their command are those who have the most power, and it is their justice that is being enforced. That being said, that difference in what Smoker and Tashigi perceive as justice and what the world government perceives as justice is hinting at another theme, the split between the Marines and the world government. The Marines may be part of the world government, but it is not the totality of it. Luffy's bounty was given by the Marines, but Robin's bounty was assigned by the world government. There have been corrupt Marines to be sure, and Marines such as Hina will go along with what the world government say because they fear reprimand, but between Kobe, who wished to destroy the corrupted Marine infrastructure, and Smoker, who defies his superiors in pursuit of his own justice, well, all I can say is that we'll see what Oda does with this setup. Another theme that has made itself known is, unfortunately, the accumulating damage to the Going Merry. From the very first moment they entered the Grand Line to the moment they left Alabasta, the Going Merry has taken many harsh blows, ones that Usopp is struggling to patch over. Their journey is nowhere near complete, and at the current rate, things are not looking good for the crew's little ship. And where is Luffy's place in all this? The theme of leadership was well explored in the royal sense, but we've seen Luffy's journey as a leader this saga as well, how his impulsiveness can endanger his crew, and he needs to learn the importance of not always immediately turning to violence as he learned from Vivi, but at the same time that sometimes Luffy's gut feeling is the right one. Luffy has also continued his liberating ways as were established in the East Blue, but as we've discovered this saga, he has inherited, although potentially unknowingly, the Will of D, And more than just a liberator, this saga has painted Luffy as someone who restores hope. As Crocus said at the beginning, was this the crew that Roger was waiting for? It places Luffy in a grander context, as part of history and as a continuation and perchance fulfillment of something potentially greater than himself. And that's why this series has its name, not just because it's the start of the Straw Hat's Grand Line journey, not just because the stakes have been raised to involve royalty and entire nations of people, it's because during this saga, Oda has deepened the world. He has introduced a depth of mystery that wasn't present there before. He introduced grand concepts and unknown adversaries. He's showing us a world that has a history and conflicts that don't even involve our main cast and crew. At least, not just yet. He's introduced us to figures beyond the scope of the saga and goals beyond just finding the One Piece. It's where the story truly begins. That is why it is the Grandeur of Alabasta. Thank you all so much for joining me on this journey. I hope you've enjoyed it, that maybe I've helped you gain a deeper insight into what is already such a well-loved series. Your support means so much to me, and as always, it's not I attempt new things, it's we attempt new things. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a fruitful... Mary? Something wrong? Wait, what in the...